Well, this is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. First, though, a reminder of our top stories. One person has died and 6 are missing after a British-flagged luxury yacht capsized in a storm off the coast of Sicily. The superyacht is owned by the British tech tycoon Mike Lynch. He is among those missing, along with his 18-year-old daughter, Hannah. Emergency measures are being introduced to prevent overcrowding in prisons as more people are sentenced over this month's riots. And thousands are gathering in Chicago for the Democratic National Convention, where Vice President Kamala Harris will be officially nominated as the party's candidate to take on Donald Trump in November. Well, hello there. You're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the Daily Mirror columnist Susie Boniface and the former Conservative Special Advisor Anita Boateng with us from now until just before midnight. And welcome to both of you. So let's take a look at the front pages then. And the Metro leading with the British tech tycoon Mike Lynch going missing, along with 5 others after his yacht sank off Sicily. The Guardian's front page also highlights how Mr Lynch and 5 others are still missing following the disaster in the Mediterranean. The Times describes Mike Lynch as Britain's Bill Gates, calling the yacht sinking a tragedy. The Telegraph reports on the ongoing search for Mr Lynch and his daughter, saying the group aboard was celebrating the end of his recent high-profile legal battle. The Daily Mirror dedicates its front page to the hero mum who saved her baby's life during the sinking of the yacht. And the Financial Times points out that Mr Lynch was only acquitted of criminal charges relating to the sale of his software company back in June. Elsewhere, the Eye leads with the government's prison overcrowding plan, saying crime suspects are left homeless under the one-in, one-out policy. The Daily Mail's front page features a royal exclusive claiming the late Queen thought Donald Trump was very rude. And the Daily Star rails against Christmas decorations and festive gifts being seen in shops already in August. Well, don't forget, scan the QR code that you'll see on screen during the programme. You can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you listen to our guests. Let's head straight to Susie and Anita. Welcome to both of you. The newspaper is absolutely dominated by this tech tycoon, this extraordinary entrepreneur who's missing in what the Metro and other papers have called a yacht horror, Anita.
Yes, I mean, this is a profound tragedy, really, that you've got so many people missing and, possibly feared dead. And so you have this kind of celebration event that was taking place in this huge, ginormous yacht. You can see the images there, just how tall that mast was. It's 246-foot mast that may have been part of what caused this kind of what seems to be a sort of freak, an accident in response to a freak storm that doesn't normally occur in that place at that time of year. And he'd just been sort of celebrating being cleared of this US fraud trial to the tune of the £11.1 billion sale of his company quite a while ago. And it just seems like one of those deep tragedies and that we're really kind of obviously thinking about both him and his daughter, who was just 18, who also is missing.
Absolutely, truly terrifying, overnight experience for those who've survived. Real fear now about those who are missing, who are, 163 feet, I think one of the papers said, possibly with where the yacht is, has sunk, they believe. One person has been found dead. And the backstory of this tycoon, which is what many of the newspapers are picking up on, including the Metro, as we see there, and the Financial Times too. It was back in 2011 he sold his company, but it was only in recent weeks that he was acquitted, and railing against this asymmetric extradition which the US and the UK has.
Yeah, he had a very long legal battle, which is probably when most people may have heard of him to start with anyway. He was sort of fairly faceless and not a public figure, really, unless you're outside the tech world before then. But in fact, he had this 12-year battle with the American authorities, and he had this situation where when the American government say, we would like someone to come over here, please, and answer some questions and face trial, whether it's Julian Assange, whether it's Mike Lynch, whether it's anybody else, they just call them up and that's it. Whereas if we have someone in America that perhaps we would also like to call back here for questioning, such as Anne Sicily, the woman who was accused of killing Harry Dunn when she was driving the wrong side of the road, we've not been able to get her back, not being able to do that. It's a very one-sided relationship between America and the UK, and he was railing against that. And I know there'll be people at home saying, well, look, there are migrants who have drowned in the Mediterranean who don't get this kind of attention. There are people in very, very badly equipped boats who are drowning, who don't get this kind of search effort looking for them. And yes, that's all true, and I have a lot of sympathy for that. However, I think the normal human tragedy that has gone on here, which is an 18-year-old who's missing, a mother who doesn't know if her daughter or her husband are going to be rescued or what's happened to them. And also, very movingly, a lady called Charlotte Golunsky, who was one of Lynch's colleagues, she worked with him, she was holidaying on the boat with a 1-year-old baby. And 4 o'clock in the morning, you find yourself in the sea, in the Mediterranean. That it's dark, the waves are crashing, there is a freak weather event going on with massive waves, terrifying winds, you can't see a damn thing, the boat has sunk, and all she could hear are people screaming in the waves around her, and she's trying, as she says here, for 2 seconds, I lost the baby in the sea, and then I immediately held her again in the fury of the waves. I held her tightly to me, and the sea was raging. And she said she was trying to hold her up just out of the water while she was trying to kick and keep herself up just so the baby didn't drown. And that, it's awful to imagine what they must have been through. Anyone goes through, regardless of wealth, I think, in this situation, is horrific. And the fact it is so deep is going to make it very, very hard to salvage anything out of that boat and find out what really went terribly wrong with it.
Yes, indeed so. And, you know, the problem was it was a celebration for him that this legal fight was over, celebration for his daughter, who appears to have got a place at Oxford University, and also elsewhere in the newspapers, the Mail and I think it was the Financial Times as well, reporting that his co-defendant in that case had died in a car accident only a few days ago.
Yes, Stephen Chamberlain, who was the co-defendant in the case, he died after being hit by a car in Cambridgeshire on Saturday. So it's just, it seems to be tragedy upon tragedy. We should say that the mother and the 1-year-old did survive against those odds in those extraordinary circumstances. But it's, you know, it's truly just one of those moments that kind of, as ever, remind you how fleeting and how lucky you can end up being, because this is the kind of event, as Susie says, that would pass without event in normal circumstances. A man gets on a big yacht, but to have this this kind of sinking happen in such a way and is obviously just completely unexpected and deeply tragic for all of those involved, including the crew.
You do get waterspouts in the Mediterranean. They usually come later in the season, and they're usually a bit further east into the Aegean and stuff, but they can be very, very rapid, very, very devastating, and it really doesn't matter how big your boat is. That waterspout is capable of picking it up, tipping it over, causing all kinds of problems. And I think the fact we are seeing more at the moment, apparently, you know, every summer they are coming a little bit earlier, and the same as we're seeing in the Caribbean with hurricanes and typhoons in the Pacific, they're happening in a more intense fashion and at different times of the year. Because of climate change, you get warmer waters, more humidity in the air, and it causes these freak events. And unfortunately, there are people who are going to be on the other end of it.
Yes, and the enclosed sea of the Mediterranean warming faster. We had an oceanographer on earlier who said the sea surface temperatures are warmer than they had been expected to be. But anyway, the search continues, clearly, for those who are still missing in that. Let's turn to the Middle East, shall we? Antony Blinken, top US diplomat, you know, back in Israel today, heading off again to speak across the Middle East tomorrow, we know. He suggests that there has been, you know, something of a change in Israel's stance, Anita.
Yes, I mean, so Blinken has been saying, and he's made about 10 trips out to Israel to kind of move negotiations on, and he remains optimistic about a decisive deal for a ceasefire. And we should say that, you know, the US is definitely the one that's applying a huge amount of pressure to kind of build some momentum around a ceasefire deal, particularly ahead of the elections in November. And yet it seems that there are still a lot of intractable issues, which, you know, hopefully there's going to be a resumption of discussions perhaps on Wednesday this week. But it does feel as though some of the challenges that that Israel are kind of presenting. Some say, and Hamas have accused Israel of bringing kind of last-minute additional conditions to the table. And so really, I mean, I think Blinken is going hell for leather and trying to make this happen, but it does seem as though it remains challenging to see a scenario whereby a ceasefire deal could be agreed in the time period that he hopes.
You know, he hints at this last chance idea. You know, not least people in Gaza are dying, hostages are dying as well. But also, you know, we're in the ticking days, I suppose, of the Biden administration, aren't we? You know, he wants to see this done. And yet we've got the Democratic National Convention where thousands of people are expected on the streets, you know, protesting against America's stance on Israel as what they are saying is as an enabler of what's happening in Gaza.
And a stance that's probably not going to change, particularly if Kamala Harris wins the election. And if Trump wins the election again, it may become a little bit more pro-Israel than it is now even. And I think what Blinken's trying to do here is really, he's kind of playing for time. This time last week, we had world leaders warning about the possibility of Iran launching attacks on Israel in retaliation for an assassination that took place on their own territory, and talks about using Hezbollah as proxies to actually undertake some kind of massive ground attack, which was going to be devastating, potentially lead to war in the a full, all-out war in the Middle East. So these negotiations are the way of stopping that happening, trying to drag people across the line. Up until now, it's been said that Netanyahu was the block on a lot of the negotiations actually getting off the ground before now. Now it seems that Hamas have got some issues. I'm sure that really what this is it's the mullahs and Biden and Netanyahu trying to hammer something out, and all doing it via their proxies. Whether they manage to do it or not really comes down to whether or not they all want a war. I suspect nobody does. Biden is not an interventionist president, as you saw with Afghanistan when he pulled out. He wants to just fix what he can in the Middle East, say, oh, I did that, and I'm all over now.
And there's the coverage, as you can see, in the Times World double-page spread. Protesters descend on Chicago to shout down Genocide Joe, who's speaking tonight, as we know, big moment for him. Emotional, no doubt, in the room too, but we'll do more on that a little bit later on. Coming up, it seems the late Queen wasn't a fan of Donald Trump. Find out why when we come back.
I'm Martin Brunt, and I'm Sky's crime correspondent. My most memorable story was, and still is, the disappearance of Madeleine McCann.
Please, please do not hurt her. Please give our little girl back.
We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news.
For detectives, the first 48 hours after a murder are crucial in the search for clues. The public expects them to find Jill Dando's killer soon. The British detectives are planning to meet forensic experts, academics, and even witch doctors.
I remember the grimmest case, the Soham murders of schoolgirls Holly and Jessica. I felt I can't undo what's happened, but I can help explain it.
Ian Huntley was arrested and charged within a fortnight of the murders.
I've never murdered anyone. I've never raped anyone. What am I in jail for?
The parole board has to decide if Bronson needs to be kept locked up for the safety of the public. My biggest challenge was to persuade a jailed diamond thief to answer my letters. Martin Brunt, Sky News, at the Old Bailey.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me once again, Susie Boniface and Anita Boateng. Welcome back to both of you. Susie, let's go to the eye, shall we? Crime suspects left on streets under one-in, one-out prison crowding plan. You know, why are they left on the streets? I thought they're supposed to be in police cells under this.
Well, yes, that's what everyone was hoping, wasn't it? The trouble is, as we saw a few weeks ago, as Labour came in, the Justice Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, came out and said, well, the first thing we're going to do is let out a load of prisoners because the Tories didn't build enough prisons. Of course, Labour didn't build enough prisons either when they were last in power, when the prison population was still increasing. But for the last 14 years, it's been the Tories, and they definitely didn't do anything. It's their fault. That's what she said. And then we get the situation where we have these massive riots, where you've had 1,000 people been arrested, you've had 670-odd that have been charged. You're probably more coming through the process who are going to start being charged, and some of them you're going to need to put them away. And in order for the government to actually stop those riots, the deterrent effect was a big part of getting people off the streets. So having instant, quick and very thorough justice was important. You've got to get some prison sentences, but there's nowhere to put them. And they've literally got to the point now where it's full. And so they're having to start to put suspects that they do arrest, and over the weekend you can usually predict you're going to have so many you'll arrest for certain things in certain places, a certain rate that you're going to do this. The prison cells are full. There's nowhere to put them. When there are lawyers and prison officers now who are warning that what will happen is when a policeman wants to arrest somebody, not necessarily because they're committing a crime right this second, but because during the process of an investigation, we now get to the point where we need to arrest you and ask you questions under caution. They can't do it because there's nowhere to put them.
People will be rightly asking, when they do a bit of the earlier release scheme, which is coming, who are you letting out to let the rioters in? That's the question people will be asking.
Yes, and I mean, I used to be a government advisor in the Ministry of Justice, and this is a really, really complicated area. And the fundamental issue is around remand, so people kind of waiting for their court dates. And the fact that there's been such a huge court backlog exacerbated actually over the summer because of the riots. And I actually think that Starmer's government has taken the right approach of having to be quite swift and quite visible and punchy with the sentencing in order to further deter people who were just sort of up for having a ruckus from actually going onto the streets, has exacerbated this existing problem that's been in existence for quite a long time. The question becomes, how do you get out of this cycle? And are you going to see significant investment into the court system that would allow the remand bulge that's come through? It's really not about sentencing, it's actually about remand to deal with this issue and therefore kind of change the dynamic. So that's the thing that you really need to happen. But I think Labour are finding what the Conservatives find, which is that ultimately when these things happen, the public outcry does need to be responded to. And also, I think there is an important deterrent effect in this particular instance that is quite strong. So, they're finding these things are altogether quite complicated.
There's going to be another public backlash if they get to the point where a judge says, well, I'd like to sentence you for what you've just done, but I've just been told by the Crown Prosecution Service that I can't. So you're going to be walking
3
out.
prison places today in this
The only thing that would save Keir Starmer's government the embarrassment of that will be the fact there are so few reporters in courts these days, and they don't tend to have court reporters anywhere. As soon as they do start hearing about it, they will be down the magistrates' court and start hearing it.
Yeah, quick word on the Queen and Trump making the front page of the Daily Mail. Fascinating.
She's a mistress of understatement, isn't she? Apparently Donald Trump was a bit rude. Crikey. I could say other things I could say about certain members of her family. But yes, no, she did feel that he was apparently, and there's a new book who has some conversations with people. You don't ever say what the Queen has told you, but now that she has passed away, some of it's starting to come out. I just wonder what would have happened if, because sometimes the things she said, they did leak a bit earlier, or she did sort of say them casually in such a way they might get reported, and they had an impact, like with the Scottish referendum. I just think if she had said that a bit sooner, maybe would America have, had the Capitol uprising? Well, actually, the Queen thinks he's rude. I don't think I'll storm the Capitol.
Yeah.
But I do think some of the comments around it are very witty. She talks about, apparently she mused over the relationship with Trump's wife, Melania, and said they must have some sort of arrangement. And she also said that she disliked the way that he looked over her shoulder as if he was looking for someone else. And I think, he has this lack of kind of social awareness, spatial awareness, particularly around women, I find. And it's sort of a lot of ego that I imagine the Queen did not take kindly to.
Just lucky he didn't grab her arm.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm glad I can buy anything else.
Quick 20 seconds on the road sweeper. Sorry, you haven't got much more time.
Oh
on
yes,
that.
no, a road sweeper who had never been on holiday anywhere, and so one of his people on his round had a GoFundMe to raise £3,000 for him. Was told he couldn't accept it because council officials can't accept gifts. So a holiday company has very carefully come up with a competition. Only he can win, and therefore he's now having his holiday. Isn't it great?
And his second foreign holiday of his life, and there's great pictures of him enjoying his time in Portugal, which is wonderful.
Anita, Susie, thank you both very much indeed.